High above the earth, where the sky softens into pastel shades of blue and silver, there is a quietness that seems to stretch forever. Clouds drift like ancient whispers, and the air feels lighter, unburdened by the weight of the world below. It is here, in this peaceful space between the heavens and the ground, that a dream once lived quietly, a dream of floating, not like a bird soaring forward, but of hovering in place, gently suspended in stillness. This dream, fragile and persistent, would take centuries to unfold, eventually giving rise to one of humanity's most quietly transformative inventions, the helicopter. Welcome to the Sleepy Journeys Through Inventions podcast, your sanctuary to learn while you sleep. My name's Jack, and I'm so happy to have you here with me. Tonight we're going to embark on a gentle journey through the rise of the helicopter. Unlike the thunderous roar of rockets or the sweeping majesty of jetliners, the helicopter's ascent into our lives was slower, more deliberate. It began not in factories, but in the pages of notebooks and the quiet corners of ancient workshops. The idea of rising straight into the air, of slipping upward without a runway, first took root in playful imagination and curious tinkering. Before it became real, it was a dream carried in bamboo toys, whispered in the swirling wind of a spinning top, and painted in the curls of Leonardo da Vinci's pen strokes. We'll begin this journey with those first glimmers of flight, centuries before the word helicopter was ever spoken. We'll float gently through time, watching as inventors and thinkers reached again and again toward vertical lift, each attempt drawing us closer to something quietly revolutionary. From the whimsical bamboo copter toys of ancient China to the dreamy elegance of Da Vinci's aerial screw, we'll ease into the story with softness and awe. We'll linger beside those who turned spinning blades and stubborn engines into something extraordinary, patiently pushing boundaries until the helicopter could finally rise. As the journey continues, we'll hover beside some of the most iconic figures of rotorcraft history, like Paul Cornu and Igor Sikorsky, feeling the gentle tremble of early flights and the calm determination of those who refuse to give up. We'll watch as these machines lifted wounded soldiers to safety, as they whispered between mountaintops, and as they quietly made themselves essential in a world that didn't yet know it needed them. Later, we'll coast into the skies of today and tomorrow, where sleek electric blades turn with barely a sound, and helicopters evolve into new forms that glide without pilots or fly without fuel. The skies are changing still, and the story of vertical flight continues to unfold. But for now, let's simply float. Let the story rise slowly, like the gentle whir of spinning rotors lifting us skyward, soft and serene. Let the stress of the day melt away as we step into the sky, not with speed or spectacle, but with calm, upward grace. Tonight, we rise together, quietly, dreamily, one rotation at a time. long before the word helicopter was ever imagined, and centuries before engines hummed or rotors turned, there existed a small and wondrous toy. It was simple, made of bamboo, no larger than a child's hand, but within it lay the seeds of an idea that would one day lift humans skyward. This toy, often called the bamboo copter or Chinese top, was crafted by careful hands and spun between young fingers, its slender shaft twirling until its blades caught the air and carried it upward. In ancient China, where paper and silk fluttered in gardens and rivers shimmered with lanterns, the bamboo copter became a quiet form of play. Children would wind the stick between their palms and release it, watching it rise briefly and float down again, dancing in the wind with the elegance of a falling leaf. There was no engine, no science book to explain the lift it created, only the simple joy of motion and the curious magic of something light defying gravity, if only for a moment. The device was usually made from a narrow stick with a lightweight rotor at the top, often made from feathers or thin bamboo blades. When spun rapidly between the hands, the rotor would lift into the air, pushed by the forces of airflow and friction, an intuitive form of aerodynamic principle. Though its rise lasted only seconds, the flight stirred questions that would linger across generations. What makes something lift? Could this be scaled? Could humans ever ride the wind the way this toy did? Written references to this toy date as far back as the Jin dynasty, more than 1,600 years ago. While the bamboo copter was never intended to carry a person, its principle, the use of rotating blades to produce vertical lift, quietly settled into human imagination. Scholars, philosophers, and later scientists would marvel at its elegance. It wasn't the answer to flight, but it posed a beautifully simple question. Its influence echoed far beyond its playful beginnings. By the time the Renaissance arrived in Europe, reports of the bamboo copter had traveled along trade routes and through curious minds. It would appear later in scientific illustrations, in notebooks and treatises, always as a symbol of a mystery just beginning to unfold. Even when it was simply a child's toy, it embodied the essence of an idea that would one day lift us higher than we ever thought possible, not with the wings of birds, but with the steady, spiraling lift of blades, turning calmly in the air. There's something profoundly dreamlike about the thought of a child, centuries ago, giggling as their bamboo toy spins upward against a twilight sky. That gentle motion, brief, flickering, graceful, mirrors the very dream of vertical flight. Quiet, tender, and persistent. An echo that would remain in the world's memory, waiting to be awakened by new minds with new tools. In the hushed corridors of history, few minds glow as brightly or as curiously as that of Leonardo da Vinci. Painter, sculptor, anatomist, engineer, his interests knew no bounds. But among his many dreams, one rose ever upward. Leonardo longed to fly, not only across the air like birds do, but to rise vertically, as if lifted by invisible hands, swirling skyward through nothing but force and form. From this quiet desire came one of his most poetic concepts, the aerial screw. Drawn in sepia ink within the pages of his codices, the aerial screw is perhaps the most famous rotary flight concept of the Renaissance. It resembles a great screw or spiral sail, wider at the base and narrowing to a gentle point. Made from linen stretched over a wire frame and envisioned to be powered by human muscle, it would, Leonardo thought, screw into the air much like a cork into a bottle, only in reverse, lifting its occupant delicately upward. Leonardo wrote of this device with a kind of dreamlike certainty, suggesting that if the spiral were turned quickly enough, it could compress the air beneath it and lift itself off the ground. Though he had no modern understanding of aerodynamics or torque compensation, the essence of the aerial screw echoed the principles behind the bamboo copter of the East. Yet his version was not a toy. It was a vision, a meditative exploration of flight, sketched with the same elegance he brought to the wings of birds and the curls of human hair. It's likely the aerial screw would never have flown, not then, nor now. Its structure was too heavy, its human-powered mechanism too weak to overcome gravity. And yet, in its failure lies its beauty. It was never built to work. It was built to dream, to imagine, to plant the idea of vertical lift deep into the artistic and scientific consciousness of a new age. What makes Leonardo's aerial screw so enduring is not its practicality, but its poetry. His design speaks to a time when the boundaries between science and art, between engineering and imagination, were soft and fluid. He observed the world in motion, the curl of a fish's tail, the arc of a falcon's glide, and sought to capture that motion in inventions that might someday mimic nature. In the aerial screw, he found not just motion, but rotation, a spiral that, like the whirl of a rising breeze, carried hope upward. His notebooks remained unpublished in his lifetime, his aerial screw merely a sketch among thousands. And yet, centuries later, aeronautical pioneers would look back at those pages and see, in the coiled linen spiral, a vision that mirrored their own dreams. While modern helicopters owe more to 20th century engineering than Renaissance invention, Leonardo's idea remains a quiet ancestor, one whose gentle spiral continues to inspire. In the end, the aerial screw was not a machine. It was a whisper, a graceful turn of thought, a sign that someone, long ago, imagined we might rise not through speed or brute force, but by delicately pressing against the air itself, as if by thought alone. As the centuries drifted forward and the dream of vertical flight lingered like mist above the earth, the 19th century brought with it new tools and new challenges. By this time, flight was no longer an idea confined to myth or sketchbooks. Engineers, dreamers, and scientists across Europe and beyond were turning quiet thoughts into careful prototypes. Yet the sky remained stubborn. The problem was not imagination, but power and control. To lift something vertically requires an immense force, one that must not only overcome the weight of the machine, but also maintain balance, direction, and stability in the air. Early inventors found themselves caught in this delicate tension. The very motion that allowed something to rise, a spinning rotor, also introduced instability. As one part of the machine turned in one direction, another part would often turn the other way. Without a solution to counter this torque, many early flying machines simply spun themselves apart. Steam power, the engine of the Industrial Revolution, was too heavy. It could move trains and ships, but not delicate rotor blades. Lighter than air balloons could float, but they could not hover or maneuver with precision. Inventors stood at a frustrating threshold. The concept of the helicopter was now visible, just barely, on the horizon, but the means to reach it remained just out of grasp. One of the earliest known attempts to bridge this gap came from a Frenchman named Gustave de Ponton d'Amicourt. In the 1860s, he coined the term hélicoptère and crafted small flying models powered by miniature steam engines. These models, though captivating, never achieved true flight. The engines were too heavy, the lift too weak. But the name he gave, a blend of the Greek words for spiral and wing, would remain. The dream was still alive. Elsewhere, other minds tried different paths. In Britain and Germany, inventors built whirling contraptions with paddles, fans, or spinning arms. Some hovered briefly in place, others merely vibrated with promise. It was not uncommon for these experiments to fail spectacularly, machines tipping, twisting, collapsing under their own ambition. And yet, behind each failure was a deeper understanding. A rotor that spun too slowly here, a center of gravity too high there. Each misstep was a lesson. The challenge of control was as vital as the challenge of lift. Even when something could be coaxed off the ground, how could it be stabilized, guided, landed safely? The early inventors had no digital gyroscopes, no software to balance flight. They relied on intuition, on careful crafting, and on slow, deliberate testing. Sometimes they succeeded in brief, stuttering moments of lift, a few inches gained, a heart lifted just as high. It was a time of fragile optimism. With each tiny gain came more insight into what flight demanded. The dream of vertical lift remained fragile, but it no longer seemed foolish. It had left the realm of fantasy and was taking shape, tentatively, experimentally, in quiet backyards and dusty workshops. The sky, it seemed, was beginning to listen. While many struggled with weight and power, others turned their attention to something just as critical: balance. As engineers and inventors explored vertical flight, they began to realize that simply lifting off the ground wasn't enough. To stay aloft, one had to stay stable. One had to master the spin. The rotor, that elegant rotating blade, was both friend and foe. It could lift a machine, yes, but it could also twist and topple it. Each invention that rose a few inches often did so with a wobble or a sudden lurch, followed by a tumble. And so, quietly, carefully, the question of stability became the heart of the helicopter dream. One early figure in this story was Enrico Forlanini, an Italian engineer with a patient soul. In 1877, he developed a small steam-powered helicopter model that managed to rise, unaided, several feet into the air. It stayed aloft for about 20 seconds, a brief flutter of success. But those seconds mattered. His machine used twin contra-rotating rotors, turning in opposite directions. In doing so, it neutralized the torque that would otherwise spin the body of the machine. With that insight, Forlanini offered something precious to the future: balance. In France, Alphonse Pénaud worked on coaxial rotor systems, one set of blades placed above another, spinning in opposite directions on the same axis. His designs, delicate and precise, floated like mechanical flowers. While his models never carried a person, they added depth to the growing understanding of rotor dynamics. Even in Russia, quiet experiments were taking place. Engineers such as Boris Yuryev and Alexei Cheremukhin explored full-scale craft with limited success. Their efforts remained tethered to the ground, but their concepts, using complex rotor arrangements and flexible frames, helped to lay the groundwork for control systems that would come decades later. Each of these pioneers worked in isolation, often unaware of one another's discoveries. There were no international conferences or digital journals to share breakthroughs. Yet, remarkably, they moved in harmony, slowly shaping the same solution. They spun their machines not with haste, but with curiosity, watching carefully as the air pushed back and learning how to calm it. It's easy to imagine these inventors at work in their quiet spaces, turning screws by candlelight, adjusting blades by hand, listening to the whir of small motors and the rustle of wind in open fields. They were not building aircraft for war or commerce. They were chasing an idea, not speed, not distance, just lift. Steady, stable, vertical lift. These early attempts might have seemed modest, even disappointing to onlookers. But within them were the blueprints of future flight. Their spinning toys and steam-powered contraptions, barely hovering, carried within them the first true notes of control. And in that control, there was promise. The dream of the helicopter was beginning to steady itself, slowly, gracefully, like a hand outstretched toward the sky. By the early 20th century, the idea of vertical flight had transformed from fanciful sketches and spinning toys into a serious challenge. Tinkerers and engineers across Europe were building larger, bolder machines, often with fragile frames and buzzing engines. Yet for all the effort, no one had yet managed to do what had long been dreamed, to lift a human being vertically under the power of spinning rotors alone. That would change, quietly but profoundly, in 1907, when a young French bicycle maker named Paul Cornu rose from the ground. Cornu was not a famous inventor. He didn't work in a grand laboratory or for a powerful patron. He was a modest engineer with an inventive spirit, working in the town of Lisieux in Normandy. His machine, like many of its time, was rudimentary, a delicate frame of wood and wire, powered by a small Antoinette engine and equipped with twin rotors on either side. Brake, time 1.0. Yet unlike previous designs, Cornu's helicopter had something special. It worked. In November of that year, Cornu climbed aboard his machine and gently started the engine. The twin rotors began to turn, their blurred blades shimmering in the autumn air. Slowly, carefully, the machine lifted from the ground. Not far, not fast, and not high. But it lifted. And for about 20 seconds, Paul Cornu hovered in place, becoming the first human to achieve free, untethered vertical flight in a rotary wing aircraft. It was a quiet moment in history. No cheering crowds, no newsreels. Just the soft hum of blades, the trembling frame of a handmade machine, and the breath of a man whose feet were no longer touching the earth. He had done it. He had hovered. The flight was far from perfect. The machine swayed and dipped, and Cornu had only limited control. After his initial success, the helicopter proved too unstable to fly regularly, and its further development was abandoned. But the significance of that moment could not be undone. For the first time, a person had risen into the air, not with wings or balloons, but with spinning rotors alone. Cornu's achievement echoed like a soft chime through the halls of aviation history. It showed that vertical flight was no longer a fantasy, it was possible. Fragile, yes. Imperfect, certainly. But real. His legacy is not just the machine he built, but the calm courage he showed in climbing aboard it. He trusted his invention enough to leave the ground, even if only briefly. And in that brief hover, he offered the world a glimpse of what was to come, a future in which helicopters would rise gracefully into the sky, carrying people and dreams alike. Paul Cornu's flight may have lasted less than half a minute, but it lifted more than just his body. It lifted the promise of vertical flight from idea to reality. A dream, hovering quietly at last. In the gentle unfolding of aviation history, some names glow quietly but unmistakably. Igor Sikorsky is one of them. A Russian-born engineer with a thoughtful mind and a reverence for the sky, Sikorsky would become the architect of the first truly practical helicopter, one that did not merely rise for a moment, but flew with purpose, control, and grace. Sikorsky's fascination with vertical flight began in childhood. Like many before him, he had been enchanted by Da Vinci's drawings and inspired by the concept of upward movement through spinning blades. After emigrating to the United States in the early 20th century, he built fixed-wing airplanes with great success. But the dream of the helicopter remained with him, a quiet, persistent vision waiting patiently in the background. By the late 1930s, the tools had finally caught up with the dream. Advances in lightweight materials, compact engines, and a deeper understanding of aerodynamics allowed Sikorsky to return to the idea that had first stirred his imagination. In 1939, in a modest workshop in Stratford, Connecticut, he unveiled his latest creation, the VS-300. At first glance, the VS-300 was simple: a metal frame, a single main rotor, and a small tail boom with a counter-rotating tail rotor to cancel out torque. But within this design lay the solution to many of the problems that had plagued early helicopter inventors. The single large rotor provided lift, while the smaller tail rotor stabilized the aircraft's spin. With this combination, Sikorsky achieved what others had only dreamed: controlled, sustained, vertical flight. On a quiet September day in 1939, Sikorsky piloted the VS-300 himself. It lifted gently from the ground, hovered steadily, and returned safely, a calm, confident moment that marked the birth of the modern helicopter. It would take years of refinements, test flights, and redesigns before the VS-300 evolved into production models, but the essential architecture remained. Unlike the erratic flights of early machines, Sikorsky's helicopter could be steered, could hover at will, and could land safely. It had direction, balance, intention. It was no longer a novelty. It was a vehicle. What set Sikorsky apart was not just his technical genius, but his vision for what helicopters could become. He saw them not as machines of spectacle, but as tools of purpose. He believed they could save lives, reach places airplanes could not, and transform the way humans moved through space. His dream was grounded in service, a quiet desire to help. The VS-300 would go on to influence generations of helicopters. Its descendants would serve in war zones, rescue missions, medical evacuations, and peaceful exploration. Sikorsky, gentle in demeanor and firm in belief, had helped humanity step fully into the era of vertical flight. Today, the name Sikorsky is etched into the side of helicopters that soar silently above forests, mountains, and cities. But its roots remain in a modest workshop and in the heart of a man who simply wanted to rise softly into the sky and help others do the same. As the 1940s unfolded, the world found itself in turmoil. The skies filled with aircraft of every kind, fighters, bombers, transports, each designed for speed, strength, and distance. But amidst the roar of engines and the urgency of battle, a quieter revolution was taking shape. The helicopter, once a dream and then an experiment, was about to find its purpose. And that purpose, gently but unmistakably, began with rescue. During World War II, the helicopter emerged not as a weapon, but as a lifeline. With its ability to rise and hover, to land in places that planes could not, the helicopter offered something precious, the power to reach the unreachable. Crashed pilots behind enemy lines, wounded soldiers in dense jungle or rocky terrain, isolated villages in the aftermath of air raids. These were places where no road led and no airplane could safely land, but a helicopter could. The United States was among the first to deploy helicopters for military use, with models like the Sikorsky R-4 becoming the world's first mass-produced helicopter. It was small and delicate by modern standards, with a narrow cabin and exposed framework, but it could fly. And more importantly, it could hover. In the China-Burma-India theater, the R-4 made history by rescuing downed pilots from otherwise inaccessible locations. These missions were quiet, precise, and often carried out under immense pressure, but they brought people home. The war also spurred developments in helicopter design and reliability. As engineers refined rotor systems and engine performance, the machines became more stable, more maneuverable, and more trustworthy. By the end of the war, military commanders and medics alike had come to see helicopters not as novelties, but as essential tools. This role deepened during the Korean War. The terrain of the Korean peninsula, mountainous, rugged, and remote, made it a proving ground for helicopter utility. Medical evacuation, or medevac, became a defining role. Light helicopters like the Bell H-13, with their exposed bubble canopies and side-mounted stretchers, whisked the wounded from the battlefield to the safety of field hospitals. These rescues saved countless lives, often within the golden hour of trauma, an innovation that changed military medicine forever. The image of a helicopter descending onto a rocky hillside, rotors stirring up dust and snow, would become one of the enduring symbols of modern rescue. It wasn't a dramatic arrival. It was precise, controlled, and often life-saving. In these quiet descents and careful takeoffs, the helicopter found its place, not as a machine of destruction, but of deliverance. From battlefield recoveries to supply drops, helicopters showed their unique ability to rise above obstacles, both literal and human-made. Their impact was felt not in the thunder of war, but in the silence that followed, the stillness of a wounded soldier safely aboard, of a life pulled from danger. In those moments, spinning gently under gray skies, the helicopter ceased to be just an invention. It became a symbol of hope. With the war years behind them, helicopters found a new role in a world seeking peace and recovery. No longer limited to military missions, these graceful machines began to show their value in everyday life, lifting, delivering, rescuing, and observing. It was not a sudden change, but a slow, graceful glide into service. The helicopter was becoming not just a vehicle of innovation, but of care. One of the most transformative roles the helicopter took on was in civilian emergency rescue. The very qualities that made it useful in wartime, its ability to hover, to land in tight spaces, to reach the otherwise unreachable, made it invaluable to medics, firefighters, and search and rescue teams. In mountainous regions, along winding coastlines, and in densely populated cities, helicopters became lifelines once more. When floods swept through valleys, or fires raced through forests, it was often the soft beat of rotor blades that announced help was near. Helicopters brought supplies to stranded communities, airlifted the injured from disaster zones, and carried emergency responders into areas where roads had vanished. These missions rarely made headlines. But for those waiting, hoping, or hurting, the sound of a helicopter approaching through the haze was a comfort like no other. In cities, too, helicopters found purpose. News organizations began using them to monitor traffic and gather aerial footage. Police departments adopted them for patrol and pursuit, gently circling above neighborhoods as quiet eyes in the sky. Hospitals built helipads on rooftops, enabling rapid medical transport that bypassed the congestion of streets below. For patients in critical condition, this could mean the difference between life and death. The golden hour saved once in war was now saving lives at home. Even during moments of celebration or ceremony, helicopters played quiet supporting roles. They transported dignitaries, hovered over parades, and offered skyward views of public gatherings. In these contexts, they were not spectacles but silent observers, offering perspective from above without intrusion. The technology itself was improving all the while. Helicopters grew safer, more reliable, and quieter. Pilots were trained not just for military precision, but for compassion and care. Many air ambulance crews came to be known for their calm in chaos, their ability to deliver patients, supplies, or aid with grace, even in the most precarious conditions. Perhaps the most touching aspect of the helicopter's evolution in this time was its quiet dependability. It became a machine people could count on, not for speed or spectacle, but for presence. When the roads failed, when the power went out, when the storm grew too fierce, it was the gentle approach of a rotorcraft that reminded people they were not alone. No longer merely an invention, the helicopter had become a symbol of reliability and rescue. In skies once filled with smoke and conflict, it now flew with a softer mission: to help, to serve, and to care, one quiet journey at a time. As helicopters grew more capable and reliable, their presence expanded far beyond rescue and urban life. They began to move through open landscapes, across fields, forests, and distant plains, bringing their unique vertical agility to agriculture, forestry, conservation, and exploration. In these wide, quiet spaces, the helicopter found new rhythm in service to the land. One of the earliest civilian uses came in agriculture. Helicopters offered farmers a new vantage point, a way to see and serve their land from above. Crop dusting, once limited to fixed-wing planes that required large open runways and long sweeps, could now be done with remarkable precision. Helicopters hovered low over rows of corn and wheat, releasing measured sprays of nutrients or pest control agents. With their nimble maneuvering and ability to fly at low altitudes, they became indispensable during crucial growing seasons. In hilly or mountainous regions where tractors could not go and planes could not safely pass, helicopters flew steady lines across sloped vineyards, orchards, and rice paddies. Their blades stirred the air gently, casting mist over delicate leaves without crushing the crops beneath. For many farmers, especially in remote or rugged areas, helicopters became quiet partners, delivering not just chemicals or water, but time, efficiency, and peace of mind. Beyond the fields, helicopters entered the forests, not with the roar of industry, but the hush of caretaking. In remote woodlands, they were used for aerial logging, lifting timber in a way that preserved the surrounding environment. Instead of cutting roads or clearing paths, operators could extract selected trees with minimal ecological disruption. This heli logging, as it became known, offered a quieter, more respectful way to harvest from the forest, one tree at a time. In the realm of conservation, helicopters played an increasingly vital role. Scientists and wildlife biologists used them to track animals across vast terrains, tagging herds, counting migrations, and observing behaviors from above. In arid savannas or snowy tundras, a helicopter could bring researchers to places inaccessible by foot or vehicle, all without disturbing the land below. They flew low and slow, becoming part of the landscape rather than an intrusion upon it. Helicopters also delivered supplies to wilderness areas, carried equipment for trail maintenance, and even helped fight wildfires. With large water buckets suspended beneath their frames, they flew steady loops between lakes and flames, releasing life-saving water over burning canopies. These missions, precise and patient, saved not just trees, but the ecosystems and communities that depended on them. In all these roles, the helicopter moved through nature with care. It did not claim dominance over the land. It offered assistance. It answered a need. Its spinning blades became part of the landscape's gentle hum, a symbol of support and stewardship. In fields golden with grain, in forests thick with green, and in skies painted with the faintest winds, the helicopter became more than a tool. It became a gentle presence, serving the earth from above with steadiness and grace. As cities stretched upward and outward, as roads filled and skylines gleamed, helicopters found a new space to serve, hovering not above open plains or wilderness, but over concrete, glass, and steel. In the quiet thrum of rotor blades slicing through urban air, a new chapter began. Helicopters became symbols of access and agility, easing into civil aviation with a kind of understated grace. Their ability to lift straight up, turn in place, and land in tight quarters made helicopters uniquely suited for the complexities of city life. No runway was needed. A rooftop would do. A small landing pad on a hospital, a corporate tower, or tucked into a park became a door to the skies. They became the quiet solution to the urban challenge of space. One of the earliest and most enduring roles helicopters filled was that of transport for executives and public officials. In cities like New York, Sao Paulo, and Tokyo, where ground traffic often crawled and travel times stretched endlessly, helicopters offered something rare and precious: time. They skimmed above congested highways, whisking passengers from airports to downtown towers in minutes. Their service wasn't loud or flashy. It was efficient, focused, and quietly revolutionary. News organizations also embraced this new perspective. Hovering above the flow of traffic, reporters could survey the pulse of the city, documenting rush hour, following parades, and even relaying images of breaking events from above. Their presence offered not only information, but reassurance. Seeing the city from the sky became a way of understanding its rhythm, its movement, and its story. Emergency services found helicopters invaluable in the urban setting. Air ambulances could lift patients from accident scenes on gridlocked streets and bring them to trauma centers in a fraction of the time needed by road. Police helicopters provided a calm aerial eye, aiding in searches, coordinating efforts during large events, and offering support during emergencies. Even fire departments used helicopters to survey wildfires encroaching on suburban edges or to drop water in places unreachable by truck. Tourism, too, found its way into the rotor's embrace. Quiet, scenic flights over cities became a new way to see familiar places, bridges, towers, parks, from a gentle altitude. Passengers gazed out of bubble windows, watching their cities become miniature worlds below, all from the soft, humming cabin of a helicopter. Over time, infrastructure adapted to meet this airborne presence. Rooftop helipads became standard on high-rise hospitals and corporate buildings. Urban planners began to envision vertical mobility not just as a dream, but as a part of daily life. And yet, for all its function, the helicopter's place in the city was never intrusive. It did not dominate the skyline like an airplane streaking overhead. It hovered. It lingered. It moved with patience and purpose. In a world that often rushed forward, the helicopter offered a different rhythm, a quieter rhythm, one that moved not just across the city, but above it, watchful, helpful, steady. A new kind of urban flight, a gentle breath of motion in the sky. As technology drifts quietly forward, the silhouette of the helicopter begins to evolve, streamlined, electrified, and reimagined for new skies. At the edge of innovation, a new generation of flying machines takes shape. eVTOLs, or electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. These delicate marvels promise quieter, cleaner, and more efficient urban flight, echoing the helicopter's spirit while whispering toward a future just over the horizon. The concept of eVTOL builds upon the very foundation that helicopters laid: vertical lift, rotor-based control, and nimble maneuverability. But instead of gas-powered engines and mechanical controls, these aircraft are powered by electricity. They use multiple smaller rotors, or ducted fans, often arranged across a wide, winged body, and are guided by digital systems that adjust each rotor in real time for balance and thrust. From the outside, an eVTOL often looks like a blend of a drone and a small airplane, sleek, symmetrical, and light. They rise vertically like a helicopter, then tilt their rotors or shift their airflow to glide forward with airplane-like efficiency. For cities filled with congestion, noise, and pollution, these quiet flyers offer a gentle solution: clean, short-range transport above it all. Companies around the world, from Silicon Valley startups to aerospace giants, are investing in this vision. The goal is not to replace the helicopter, but to extend its legacy, to make vertical flight available to more people, in more places, for more purposes. eVTOLs are being imagined as air taxis, emergency responders, cargo carriers, and even personal aircraft. Their operations could be quiet enough to blend into city life, with the soft hum of electric fans replacing the deep thrum of traditional rotors. Yet despite the futuristic designs and digital controls, the essence of the dream remains the same. These machines are still about lifting upward, safely, smoothly, and with purpose. They are about reaching places otherwise blocked by terrain or traffic. They are about offering new freedom, not in speed, but in direction. Challenges remain. Battery technology, regulatory pathways, and public trust are all part of the careful work ahead. eVTOLs must prove themselves not just in innovation, but in reliability. They must earn their place in the sky as quietly and carefully as the helicopters before them. But the promise is clear. In testing zones across the world, prototypes already rise like petals on the wind, hovering, transitioning, and gliding softly back to Earth. Each flight is a note in a new song of mobility, sung in harmony with the air. The rise of eVTOL is not the end of the helicopter's journey. It is a continuation, a new branch of the same slow-growing tree, one rooted in the bamboo copters of ancient China, the sketches of Vinci, and the quiet hover of Cornu and Sikorsky. As they lift into tomorrow's skies, these electric flyers carry something timeless, the dream of vertical flight, reimagined in silence and light. As we drift into the near future, the helicopter remains not as a relic, but as a companion, still evolving, still serving, still dreaming skyward. Even as electric flight rises and automation advances, the helicopter holds its place in our world, adapting with care and purpose. Its tomorrow is not marked by reinvention, but by refinement, by quiet progress, by a deepening of its original promise to hover, to help, to heal. One of the most anticipated paths forward lies in autonomy. Imagine a helicopter that flies itself, navigating by sensors, guided by data, with no human at the controls. These autonomous rotorcraft are already in development, designed to reach dangerous or inaccessible locations where human pilots may be at risk. In disaster zones, such machines could search for survivors. In remote regions, they could deliver vital supplies, all with precision and without pause. Hybrid helicopters, too, are on the rise, combining traditional engines with electric systems to improve efficiency and reduce environmental impact. These designs aim not for speed, but for harmony with nature. Lighter materials, quieter rotors, and cleaner energy sources allow helicopters to fly with less disruption, leaving behind not smoke and noise, but soft wind and movement. In medical care, helicopters will continue to be essential. With faster onboard diagnostics, advanced life support systems, and coordinated hospital networks, the air ambulance of the future becomes more than just a transport. It becomes a mobile extension of emergency care. For patients in critical need, these gentle flying clinics will offer not just speed, but stability, safety, and a moment of peace in chaos. Urban environments, too, will see helicopters blend more deeply into daily life. Precision navigation systems will allow smoother landings on smaller helipads, even in densely packed cities. Noise reduction technology will let them pass over neighborhoods with barely a whisper. Their visibility may shrink, but their importance will not. And then there's exploration. In places where no road will ever reach, Arctic stations, mountain outposts, islands and rainforests, helicopters will continue to be our quiet guides. Their unique ability to rise, pause, and return will make them invaluable in mapping, surveying, and protecting fragile ecosystems. But perhaps the most beautiful part of the helicopter's tomorrow is that it is still being written. The dream that began with spinning toys and spiral sketches has never stopped evolving. It has simply become more patient, more thoughtful, more tuned to the needs of the world. Somewhere in a workshop or studio, a young engineer draws a new kind of rotor. Somewhere else, a child watches a helicopter lift gently above a hospital and wonders how it floats. The dream is alive in both. The helicopter's future won't arrive with fanfare. It will come, as always, with a soft hum, a steady lift, a presence felt more than heard, one that brings hope, connection, and the quiet joy of rising, ever so gently, into the sky. As our journey through the history of the helicopter draws to a close, we find ourselves gently descending once more, returning not to where we began, but to a deeper sense of understanding. The sky is still and pale above, a canvas brushed with the softest strokes of dusk. And